Hello, I'm Patricia, my husband, Willie, and I live in a small annex attached to his parents' house, while I stay in the annex alone. Willie lives with his parents in the main house. This annex, once a simple project by Willie's grandfather as a retreat, has been converted into a livable space, though it's about the size of a standard room, and I've put in a lot of effort to make it cozy. In the first 4 years of our marriage, Willie and I lived in a regular apartment, but one day, his parents, who adore him deeply, expressed a strong wish for him to move back home. Overwhelmed by their emotional display of hugs and tears, Willie felt it was his duty to return to them, a decision that left me feeling a mix of surprise and uncertainty. Willie and I met at work, where he started as my subordinate. We dated for 4 years while he lived with his parents, which perhaps deepened his nostalgia for home. Despite moving out when we married, he had been raised with little involvement in household tasks, and his upbringing drew him back to the comfort of his parents' home. When I tried suggesting we split household duties, Willie seemed uneasy and admitted he'd never really done such tasks before. Each time I brought it up, he'd make a brief attempt, only to eventually shrug and say, "This isn't for me, Patricia, you're just better at it." While both of us worked full-time, I held a higher position, so I felt more inclined to share the responsibilities. However, after several exhausting attempts, I found it easier to handle things on my own. Our dynamic shifted when I started working remotely. Willie initially seemed surprised to see me home every day, though he quickly settled into the new routine, or so I thought. But as time passed, it became clear he hadn't fully grasped what working from home entailed. A few years into this arrangement, Willie's parents visited and expressed a longing to live closer to him. Watching their emotional reunion, I felt an unexpected sense of isolation. Eventually, respecting Willie's desire to be close to his family, we made the decision to move in with his parents. Throughout our relationship, Willie consistently chose locations close to his parents, whether it was for renting an apartment or picking a job. For me, working remotely meant location didn't matter, but it often felt like we were uprooting ourselves to prioritize his parents' proximity. Once we moved in, Willie's mother warmly expressed gratitude, saying, "Thank you for caring for Willie, Patricia. Now, I'll take care of him. You can handle everything else." Initially, I thought this meant I'd be relieved from some of the daily chores, but I soon realized she had other plans. My mother-in-law began catering to Willie's every need, cooking special meals, washing and ironing his clothes, keeping his shoes immaculate, and buying various personal items just for him. Meanwhile, the rest of the household chores, including cooking and cleaning for his parents and me, fell entirely on me. Though I worked full-time, I found myself shouldering all the responsibilities of maintaining the larger family home. This new arrangement left me feeling disappointed. It seemed to bring Willie and his parents joy, but for me, it meant more responsibilities and no apparent benefits. One day, while cleaning, my father-in-law approached me hesitantly and asked if I could contribute financially. Confused, I asked for clarification, and he explained his difficulty in asking Willie to contribute, saying, "He's worked hard, and it's hard for me to ask him for money." This revelation added a new layer to the situation, highlighting the imbalance in both chores and finances. Previously, Willie and I had shared expenses when living in our apartment, but on shopping trips, he would often convince me to cover various costs, from extra groceries to clothes, and would respond childishly if I hesitated, accusing me of being stingy. Despite our financial disagreements, I found some comfort in knowing that Willie didn't interfere much with my daily life, but that changed dramatically when we moved in with his parents. While Willie stayed distant from my routine, his mother actively disrupted it. She frequently interrupted my work-from-home schedule, demanding that I prioritize household chores over my job. Often, she'd barge into my space, tugging at my clothes to pull me away from work, making it almost impossible to focus. Frustrated, I eventually brought this up with Willie, half expecting him to take his mother's side. Surprisingly, he listened attentively and assured me he'd talk to her about giving me some space. I was hopeful we'd reach a solution that would balance both my needs and theirs. But Willie's idea of a compromise was not what I expected. It involved relocating me to the annex, a small detached building on their property, effectively placing even more distance between us. One day, somewhat playfully, I asked Willie if I could completely remodel the annex, maybe even knock it down to build something new. To my surprise, he shrugged and said, "You can do whatever you want with it." His casual approval opened a door I hadn't anticipated, granting me a sense of autonomy I hadn't felt in a long time. Taking him at his word, I threw myself into transforming the annex, cleaning, repainting, and redoing the walls to make it my own. I noticed Willie never once stopped by to see the progress or show interest. It soon became clear that he had no intention of joining me in the annex. In this family setup, I was the outsider. Sometimes I'd come home from working late to find that Willie, his parents, and even extended family had gone out for a meal or planned an outing. often arranged by his mother. Over time, it felt as if these plans were intentionally made to exclude me, as if she hoped I might eventually leave her son. Yet, despite these dynamics, Willie's freedom over the annex became my opportunity. I poured myself into DIY projects, adding shelves, personal touches, and creating a space I loved. Surprisingly, once I moved out, neither Willie nor his parents ever showed interest in visiting the annex, even though they knew about my renovations. Their indifference underscored the reality: I was no longer a part of the family. Living apart from the main house, free from the constant disruptions and Willie's mother's presence, has brought me an unexpected sense of peace. I began to embrace my newfound independence. Living in the annex felt almost like having my own place, and the freedom was unexpectedly liberating. The physical separation meant my mother-in-law could no longer interfere with my work, and I found solace in this distance. During renovations, I installed new locks and upgraded security, turning the annex into my personal sanctuary. I made sure no one, not even Willie or his parents, could enter without my permission. This newfound privacy made me realize that this separation might actually be a blessing in disguise. But my mother-in-law seemed to sense my growing independence and wasn't about to let me find peace so easily. Her subtle attempts to drive me away started with small irritations, like placing trash by my door on garbage day or hosting barbecues without inviting me, making sure the smell of grilled meat drifted my way. I couldn't help but smile at the futility of her attempts. One day, she summoned me to the main house under the guise of offering leftovers. Sensing there was more to it, I went along. When I arrived, she was waiting for me alone in the living room. A single piece of paper placed dramatically on the table, a divorce form. It was clear she wanted to force this decision, knowing that Willie would comply if she pushed. She glared and said smugly, "Isn't it time you gave up? There's no reason for you to stay married to Willie. Get out, you freeloading, unemployed woman." Her boldness took me aback, but her certainty only fueled my resolve. Filled with excitement at the prospect of freedom, I picked up the divorce form, saying, "I'll head to the city court right now. Thanks for this." My mother-in-law, expecting resistance, was stunned at my enthusiasm. I immediately submitted the papers, then packed my things, and headed to the main house to inform her. I told her the divorce was finalized and that she could do whatever she pleased with the annex. My upbeat response to leaving seemed to surprise her. Despite her clear satisfaction at my departure, she managed to wish me luck. Willie and his father, suddenly realizing I was actually leaving, looked at me with concern. "Are you really going? What will we do without Patricia?" they asked. I thanked them for the time I had spent in the annex and explained it was time to move on now that we were divorced. Within days, I moved into a luxury apartment I had planned on for some time. Soon after settling in, I received an unexpected call from my mother-in-law. Her voice was awkward as she began. "Patricia," I greeted her cheerfully, asking how things were going with the cabin. She quickly shifted to a more serious topic, mentioning finances. Apparently, Willie had told her I'd been giving his father $5,000 a month, something I was eager to clarify. Confirming her statement, I explained that, contrary to her earlier accusations of me being an unemployed freeloader, I was, in fact, gainfully employed. Her stunned silence over the phone spoke volumes. It seemed she genuinely believed I had quit my job entirely. I quickly set the record straight, sharing that not only had I moved on from my last position, but I was now the president of a new company that was pioneering a fully remote work system, a company very much at the forefront of modern work environments. Her response was a mix of disbelief and confusion, and I sighed, realizing that Willie, too, had likely been unaware of my professional growth. It only underscored the distance between us, not just physical, but in our understanding of each other. Living with his parents, it was clear he had never fully embraced his role as a husband. She then asked about my income, seemingly curious whether my new position had also come with a pay increase. I mentioned offhandedly that it was around $3 million, though this figure was a bit of an exaggeration, a simplification to avoid delving into the complexities of my actual earnings. She quickly seized on this, asking, "With that kind of money, could you lend us some? Your father-in-law was laid off, and he didn't tell anyone. We've been getting by with the $5,000 you've been giving us, but neither Willie nor I knew about his job loss until recently." This revelation helped me piece together my father-in-law's past remarks about feeling pitiful, having to ask his son for money. I realized now that his earlier words were more of a strategy to elicit financial help from me. They had subtly maneuvered this monthly $5,000 under the guise of shared expenses, banking on the assumption that my professional success equaled wealth. Back then, I didn't mind too much since it allowed me to live peacefully in the annex. But now, after my divorce from Willie, I felt no ties left to his family. When I pointed this out, my mother-in-law began to plead. "That's not true. To me and Willie, you're still family. Please come back to us." I declined, fully aware of the likelihood of being taken advantage of again. There were no benefits in returning to a relationship with Willie, and I found it ironic they still saw me as family after having pushed me out. Living on my own now feels liberating, similar to when I was married, except now my money goes toward myself, and I no longer see $5,000 siphoned off monthly. I much prefer this life. With a firm goodbye, I ended the call without hesitation, puzzled as to why they thought I'd ever consider returning. For my mother-in-law, I imagine this was a last-ditch effort. In reality, Willie's income was modest, and he had a well-known habit of avoiding responsibility, often saying, "I can't do it," and passing tasks on to others. This trait kept him from progressing in both his personal and professional life, and he remained a regular employee with no salary advancements. Now, with his father laid off and his mother being a housewife, they struggled to keep their large home and eventually had to sell it. Ironically, they all moved into the annex I had renovated, a space just right for one but cramped for three. Since then, I rarely think of them. I continue to enjoy my life peacefully, savoring the independence and tranquility that come with my new freedom.